He walked onto that stage looking like he had already lost. Shoes worn down at the heel. Jeans that had seen too many hard years. A shirt ironed with so much care that it hurt to look at. He was not the kind of man you expected to see under those lights. He was not the kind of man Simon Cowell usually bothered to look up from his notepad for. But Arnel Pineda was not there to meet anyone's expectations. He was there because he had run out of every other option. The audience at Britain's Got Talent that evening had no idea what was about to happen. They were restless, bored after a long string of forgettable acts, checking their phones, shifting in their seats. The judges were tired. Simon Cowell had that expression he wore like armor, that cool, slightly contemptuous half-smile that told you he had already decided this was going to be a waste of his time. Arnel stepped into the center of the stage and the host asked his name. He said it softly. Almost apologetically. Like a man who had spent so many years being invisible that saying his own name out loud still felt like a risk. The audience didn't react. Why would they? He was small. He was quiet. He looked like someone's uncle who had wandered in from the parking lot. Simon Cowell glanced up. Just once. Then he looked back down. That moment, that tiny, dismissive glance, would later become one of the most talked about images in the show's history. Because what happened next was the kind of thing that doesn't happen on television. The kind of thing that makes you forget you're sitting in a room full of strangers and suddenly you're just a human being watching another human being break open in front of you. The music started. And Arnel Pineda opened his mouth. What came out was not what anyone expected. Not even close. It was power. Raw, unfiltered, impossible power. It was a voice that had been forged not in a recording studio but in the streets. In the years of singing for coins outside convenience stores in Manila. In the years of eating whatever he could find and sleeping wherever he could manage. In the years after his mother died when he was 13 years old and his father disappeared and Arnel was alone in the most complete and devastating sense of the word. He had nothing. He had never had anything. Except this voice. And now the voice was filling that enormous theater like it had been waiting its entire life for exactly this room, exactly this moment, exactly this chance. The first notes hit the audience like a wave. You could see it on their faces. The shift. The moment the boredom cracked open and something real came flooding through. Heads turned. Phones went down. People who had been whispering to each other went silent. A woman in the third row pressed her hand to her mouth. Arnel didn't move much. He didn't need to. He just stood there with his eyes closed and let everything he had ever suffered pour out through the music. Every hungry night. Every door that had been shut in his face. Every year of wondering if he would ever be seen, ever be heard, ever matter to anyone at all. He sang like a man who had nothing left to lose. And that is the most dangerous kind of performer in the world. Simon Cowell had straightened up in his chair within the first 30 seconds. He would later struggle to explain exactly what he felt in that moment. It was not just that the voice was technically extraordinary, though it was. It was the way it made you feel like something important was happening. Like you were witnessing something that couldn't be manufactured or rehearsed or planned. Like you were watching a human soul refuse to be defeated. The song built. The audience was completely, utterly silent. That silence in a theater full of thousands of people is its own kind of sound. It pressed in from every direction. It said, "We are all holding our breath." It said, "Don't stop." It said, "We didn't know we needed this but now we can't imagine not having heard it." Arnel's voice climbed higher. And higher. And when it reached the peak, when he hit that note, that impossible, perfect, shattering note, the silence exploded. The crowd came to its feet so fast it looked like a single organism had decided to rise all at once. The sound was enormous. It was the sound of thousands of people experiencing the same thing at the same moment, which is something so rare that most people only feel it a handful of times in their lives. It was a sound made entirely of recognition and awe, and something that felt uncomfortably like grief, because beauty that powerful always carries a shadow of sadness, because you know it will end. Arnel opened his eyes. He seemed almost surprised by what he saw. He had been so deep inside the music, inside the memory, inside all the years of pain that had built to this single moment, that the roaring crowd seemed to reach him slowly, like light through deep water. He blinked. He looked out at all those standing, screaming people, and his face did something that cameras caught from every angle and that people would watch on their phones millions of times over the following days and weeks. He cried. Not the polite, dignified crying of someone who has planned their emotional moment. Real crying. The kind that comes from somewhere you've been keeping sealed for years because if you open it you're afraid of what will come out. His face crumpled. His shoulders shook. He pressed one hand to his chest as if trying to hold himself together, and it didn't work because there was too much inside him and it all came out at once. The audience cried with him. Strangers who would never see each other again stood in that theater and wept for a man they had known for 3 minutes, because his pain was recognizable and his triumph was recognizable, and the human heart, no matter where it comes from or what language it thinks in, knows what it is watching when it watches someone survive. Simon Cowell sat very still. That was what the cameras kept returning to. Simon Cowell. Sitting very still. Not writing on his notepad. Not maintaining that carefully constructed expression of professional detachment. Just sitting there with something on his face that looked, if you watched closely enough, like he was trying to decide whether or not he was going to cry. He didn't cry. But it was close. When the theater finally quieted enough for anyone to speak, Simon Cowell leaned forward toward his microphone. He looked at Arnel Pineda. And for a long moment he said nothing. The silence stretched out. The audience waited. Arnel waited, wiping his face with the back of his hand, trying to compose himself, unsure if what he was feeling was hope or something too fragile to name. Then Simon said, "I don't know where that came from. I don't know how you did that. But I have never, in all my years of doing this, heard anything quite like what you just did." He paused. That was one of the greatest performances I have ever witnessed on any stage. The crowd erupted again. Arnel shook his head slowly, like a man who has been told something so good that he doesn't trust it yet. Like a man who has been disappointed so many times that good news feels like a trap. But it wasn't a trap. It was real. It was the moment that everything changed. Because what Simon Cowell couldn't have known, what the audience couldn't have known, was that Arnel Pineda had almost not come. He had stood outside that theater for 40 minutes, in the rain, trying to make himself walk through the door. He had told himself 100 times that this was pointless, that he would be humiliated, that no one wanted to hear a small man from Manila sing in a room full of people who had never heard his name. He had almost walked away. The version of this story where Arnel walks away exists. It is a dark story. It is the story of a man who never finds out what he was capable of. It is the story of a voice that the world never hears. But that is not the story that happened. What happened is this: Arnel Pineda stood in the rain outside that theater and made the choice that all great things require. He chose to step forward instead of backward. He chose to risk humiliation instead of settling for invisibility. He chose to believe, just barely, just enough, that maybe the thing inside him that had kept him alive through all those hard years was worth something. He walked through the door. He stepped onto the stage. He opened his mouth. And Simon Cowell was left completely, utterly, permanently speechless. Some voices are too big for ordinary rooms. Some stories are too powerful for ordinary telling. Some moments exist to remind us that the human spirit, tested and broken and rebuilt and tested again, is capable of something so beautiful it stops time. This was one of those moments. And if you have tears left, if that place in your chest that responds to impossible, real, hard-won triumph is still capable of feeling something, then you already know exactly what Arnel Pineda felt when he walked off that stage. He felt, for the first time in his life, like he was exactly where he was supposed to be.